Are we on like Facebook Live or what are we? No?
I don't know.
We can be, if you want to.
No.
Okay, okay.
Okay, numbers are filling up. Emma, quick question. Do you know how many folks we should be expecting?
We have 120 registered.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't see how many people are waiting, but I think when we hit like 75, 80, we should be good to start.
Okay. Well, looks like we're hanging at 72. You ready to start, Case?
Good to me.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Blair Satterfield, and I'm the chair of the architecture program at UBC Sala. And Case Lockman is on your screen as well, and he's the chair of the landscape architecture program here at UBC, both the master's programs and all the kind of related programs that are offered within those two umbrellas. We also have on the screen a couple of our standout students, Arnold and Lee. You can see them on the screen. And also four of our key staff members. We have Emma Fennell, Tara Deans, Adam Hua, and Janice O'Donnell, who represent different programs. And all these folks will be talking to you a little bit or fielding questions for you during this open house for UBC Sala and specifically UBC Sala's master's programs. Case, did you want to say a few words? You want me to keep going?
I think you're on a roll, so let's.
I'm on a roll. Okay, so the way the next hour is going to play out, we're going to tell you a little bit about the two programs specifically and related programs, architecture and landscape architecture. We've invited Arnold and Lee along to just give you a little bit of a sense of what Sala is like from a student's perspective. And then our staff members are here to both tell you a little bit about potentially applying for the programs and also to give you a sense or to field questions that you might have about your applications, about what's involved in being at Sala. The questions will be handled, I think, through question and answer feature in Zoom, and it'll be upvoted by you. So if you see a question that you wanted to ask, please just click upvote. And the more people that want to hear that question, that'll get kind of distilled and pushed to the top of the screen.
Yeah, and then I think in the background, I think Tara will answer questions that she feels she can answer immediately. And sometimes you'll see will be answered live, and then one of us will be assigned to answer that question.
Great. Barring protest from anybody else on the screen, I think I'll just move right into a quick overview of the architecture program. So I'm going to share a screen. All right. As I said before, my name is Blair Satterfield, and I'm an associate professor and the chair of architecture. I need to progress slides. The School of Architecture specifically is an umbrella over three specific programs. The MArch program, the Masters of Architecture, with both an AP and a non-AP track, as well as MASA, which is a Master of Advanced Studies in Architecture. That's a degree that you would take if you already held a master's degree and you wanted to do more specific research. And then also the MARCLA program, which is a Master of Architecture and a Master of Landscape Architecture. You can pursue both of those degrees concurrently. I'm going to go back briefly to the first slide. Sala is a larger school. The School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture also includes other programs. A brand new Bachelor of Design program, which is an early entry right out of high school design program that we're very excited about. And then analogous to the MARC, the MASA, are the MLARC, the Master of Landscape Architecture, which Case will tell you about, and also a MASLA degree, which is an opportunity for you to do advanced studies in landscape architecture. Kind of rounding out our stable of possible degrees are a MUD program, a Master of Urban Design, as well as the MEL, which is a degree that's designed really for people returning from the professional realm to basically work in engineering excellence. Roughly 1 year ago today, I spoke at a similar event to this one. And at the time I brought up Blade Runner. It was 2019, the date the film was set, and being kind of a sci-fi nerd, I was really excited about using the film as a vehicle for discussing design. Specifically the idea of futurism, world building, and how each relates to the discipline of architecture. For those of you who may not know, Blade Runner is Ridley Scott's imagining of Philip Dick's 1968 novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It was made in 1982 and is a cult favorite for genre enthusiasts and architects alike. It's kind of ridiculous, the number of architects that fetishize this film. It's a noir-style film set in a dystopic future that explores issues of status, human rights, artificial intelligence, free will, scarcity, and access, and environmental collapse. Only 1 year later, however, the need for citing Blade Runner to describe these issues seems sort of superfluous. 2020 has been a very challenging year and has brought many of these exact problems into sharp focus. So back to science fiction just really briefly, why do I think science fiction is an interesting vehicle for talking about architecture? Well, one of the reasons is that the rules are very rigorous and that the story and the narrative are rules driven, that science fiction or good science fiction is really kind of rigorously adheres to its own narrative and its own set of constraints. So good science fiction imagines the world across scales, kind of new ideas, and it really is a form of futurism. And I would argue that design in general is a form of futurism, whether you're imagining a future city on the moon or you're imagining a future library down the street, you're imagining a possible future, and then you yourself as a designer are rendering that thing viable and visible and real. Architecture, like science fiction, also adheres to a lot of the things that we focus on in an architecture education. There's rigorous investment in history and theory, background stories, which is what we do with our own history and theory programs. There's a high degree of rigor in both. We lean heavily on technology. We have to understand physics in applied forms. How does gravity behave? How do materials behave in situ? We think about science, the environment. We also think about aesthetic and details, craft and context, cultural constructs, and political constructs. And I think good storytelling is also built around the ideas of empathy and inclusion, which is something that all good designers think about. So 2019 was full of problems, political, social, environmental, but our perception of 2019 in hindsight, I think, tends to be one of relative normalcy. We all behave the way that we were comfortable behaving for all the years that led up to that year. 2020 is different. We've experienced a global pandemic. We've seen and perhaps participated in the fight for basic rights for BIPOC friends and other traditionally marginalized groups, all while experiencing deepening economic divides and continuing environmental challenges. Each problem is radical and is as radical as those dreamed up in any fictional narrative. There is uncertainty in the world, to say the least. And in the middle of all of this upheaval, transition, and change, all of you decided that you might want to start a design degree. Believe it or not, I actually think that's a good thing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why. As designers, we think a great deal about context. Good designers invest in research about given project sites. We consider how a site connects to its immediate surroundings, physically, systemically, and culturally. We also think about the environment and social impact of our work and the economics of our designs from assembly to operation. We imagine the life of buildings and landscapes we create, and we use entourage animation to breathe life, community, and culture into our propositions. Each of these forces shape our work as surely as the same forces shape each of us. The forces currently bearing down on us are very fierce, and it would be easy and even reasonable to despair, to sit this one out, to kind of wait and see what's going to happen. And I would argue, don't. If you have any ability to insert yourself into the world, now is as good a time as any, and maybe a better time than most to do so. Architecture and its allied fields, and I'm including landscape architecture, urban design, all of those fields are fundamentally optimistic disciplines. They're designed to identify problems and to engage on them or engage them. As designers, our job is to consider very real, difficult, and often limiting contexts, and then imagine better futures within them and for them. Our job is to engage diverse community groups, political bodies, and private entities, and to help shepherd our collective ideas through them. This catalog of projects here represents thesis projects by Sala architecture students, all done last year. You can actually go and visit and see those. We'll drop that link, or maybe somebody can drop that link into the chat. You can download a publication that contains both the architecture thesis projects and the landscape architecture thesis projects from the last calendar year at that link. I've gone through the same slide and I've put tags on what I think kind of in general each of these thesis projects was tackling. And it's a pretty revealing thing. I think if you really want to understand a school, look at what the students are working on when they can choose the subject matter themselves. A lot of what we teach you, we're going to determine and dictate to you because it's a professional program and we're trying to build you into professionals that have covered and understand a variety of issues. But there are moments in our programs when your voices really shine through. I think each of these projects reflects an interest in agency, engagement, and an investment in working to improve many of our communities. The life of our school is also built around experiences in, around, and outside of the classroom. That sounds like a funny thing to say when we're all in quarantine, but these images really speak to how Sala wants you to put your hands on materials, wants you to go into other communities and situations to learn, wants you to engage both in us as teachers, in each other as learners, and as with everybody as potential collaborators. And what you're looking at here are pictures of design build, student competition where they made themselves into sushi for a street festival, digital fabrication projects, studies abroad to Asia, to Central Asia, to South America, to Europe, and then just the kind of community that Sala builds in general. I thought this was a funny slide from a Zoom crit that we had just the other day. Here we're creating former Sala students. We're presenting to another body of current Sala students about work that they do. And Steve there, who's highlighted, actually designs furniture for cats, which I think is wildly amazing, but it's also an interesting way that I think the world is moving, where we're not only considering each other as clients, we're considering other members of our community, whether they're pets, or animals or entire ecosystems as places and people and systems for which we should be focusing our talents and skills. So things to think about, you're not simply contemplating a degree in architecture at this point or landscape architecture. You're really thinking about joining a community of talented and motivated individuals who all want to positively impact the world. And I think that's a great way to describe Sala. We're all excited that you're here on this call. We would be very happy to include your voices to those already at Sala, and we look forward to collaborating with all of you and answering any questions you might have. And with that slide, I'm going to hand it over to Case to tell you a little bit about the landscape architecture program.
Thank you, Blair. That was excellent setup also. Let's see, I think everyone should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So my name is Kees Lokman. I'm an associate professor and chair of the landscape architecture program. I wanted to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from my office, my home actually in Kitsilano, which is situated in the unceded traditional territories of the Coast people, specifically the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I'm humbled and honored to live, learn, and work here. It's always hard to decide what to talk about during open houses, because some of you, I think, as Blair mentioned, already know what particular field you might be studying. Others might already know what you want to do, but you're looking at different schools. And some of you might still be debating between subjects. So with that, I kind of framed my talk a little bit similar as Blair, is hopefully to inspire you and allow the Q&A session to enable us to talk about more practical things. And so I'll be talking a little bit about the idea of landscapes as palimpsest, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. A few years ago, I read this fascinating book by Jonathan Raban called Driving Home: An American Journey. He's a great writer, and in the introduction, he discusses how one can observe and consider writing, language, and landscapes as a way to better understand people, context, place, and history. In the words of Raban, trying to understand the habitat in which we live requires an ability to read it, and not just in the loose metaphorical sense. Every inhabited landscape is a palimpsest. Its original parchment nearly blackened with the cross-hatchings of successive generations of authors. And so what that means in our region, you know, we look at it and we draw from it and we're inspired by it. And in particularly in landscape architecture, we're very interested in how you read, see, and understand the landscape. So here is a kind of an animation of what we're drawing on here is the Fraser River Delta, which has formed over the past 10,000 years and has been a marker of the development of different ways of living. The ocean and its waterways have long been central to the life and culture of indigenous people along what is now called the Pacific Northwest. The land itself has shaped the richness and diversity of human cultures, who in turn have transformed the land. Shown here is an image of a clam garden, an ancient mariculture technique that involves building a rock wall at the low tide line in order to capture sediment for the creation of oceanic terraces that can be inhabited by clams and a diversity of species, providing at once critical habitat and food security for its cultivators. In other places, these interventions have been more forceful, transforming entire shorelines, changing hydrological systems and enabling new modes and models of occupation. Shown here is the infill of Falls Creek, located at the center of Vancouver. And these transformations are not always fully agreed upon by all. Understanding power relations and vested interests are equally important in reading the landscape and planning for its future. These images show protests against a proposed freeway that would have destroyed much of Strathcona, Chinatown, and Gastown in Vancouver. Events such as these are more than simply moments in time. They become part of a place and part of its identity. Changes are also imminent. Some changes happen hourly or daily, like the weather or tides. Others are seasonal. Yet others, like climate change and sea level rise, will unfold over the next decades and centuries, fundamentally changing the way we live and relate to the land. We can get a glimpse of this future by looking at this image, for example, taken during King Tide event along the Kitsilano Pool in Vancouver. Major disruptions such as floods and wildfires have left and continue to leave traces and scars on the land. How can we design with these dynamics? Native versus non-native species, which plants and animals will be best adapted to these disruptions? And reading the landscape is also about analyzing and discovering potential for regeneration of ecosystems and cultural practices. It's about cultivating knowledge and using this knowledge to co-design and co-manage resilient communities for all living things, including people, plants, and animals. And that is exactly what we do here at SALA and at the MLA program, as Blair has already alluded to. We envision futures for landscapes and communities around us and across a range of scales, from the garden to the region. I had to put in a drawing from Lee in here because she'll be speaking to you shortly. Representation is at the core of everything we do. We use a wide range of media and outputs to develop novel ways of drawing, visualizing, and modeling these layered narratives and living landscapes. At the human scale, we investigate programmatic objectives, climatic and site conditions, and maintenance constraints affecting planting design. We also examine the role and importance of design in fostering human health and well-being. We also use methods of landscape visualization to reveal the relationships among infrastructural networks, material research flows, socio-political issues, and environmental transformation. This spatial knowledge can be used to envision new possibilities for future landscapes and infrastructural adaptations. We do this by developing what-if scenarios. Here is a drawing again by Lee, who will speak to you shortly, which speculates on what might happen to Falls Creek if the city decides to invest in a sea gate at the Burrard Bridge in order to hold back surging seas and to protect critical infrastructure and real estate. And our faculty members are active in a diversity of research topics, covering a broad range of knowledge and expertise, including climate change adaptation, spatial justice, ecological planning, health and well-being, and landscape theory. Our curriculum combines a robust core sequence with the opportunity to take electives, directed studies, co-op work placements, studies abroad, and design-build courses. And for those with an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture, we have the Advanced Placement Program, providing a condensed curriculum with enough possibilities to customize this as well. Lastly, I wanted to make everybody aware, not just those interested in the landscape architecture degree, but also in architecture and all the other programs, that we have office hours, drop-in office hours between 3 and 4 that you can access if you go to the admissions page of the SALA website. And this will provide you an opportunity to talk to Janus or Adam or Tara, and they can provide answers to the questions that you might have beyond what we can address today. So we're very excited to receiving hopefully your applications, learning more about what drives and motivates you, how you see the landscape, and how you may contribute to the vitality of our SALA community. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lee and Arnold.
So while Arnold's sharing his screen, I'm Lee. I am in my final year of the dual degree program, so that's the MARCLA degree. And that's the 4th year I'm not an AP student. And hi, Arnold.
Hey, Lee, do you see my screen?
Yeah, I do.
Great, awesome. I'm Arnold. I'm in the MARC program, and I'm also in my final year.
So we'll start off by showing you just a slide of the campus as we see it. Most of our presentation is sort of from photos from our phones and our life at SALA. So the first slide is just the buildings that we have spent a lot of time in over the years at SALA. The top one's LaSalle, the green building is the landscape annex, and the bottom one is Macmillan. And as a student at SALA, you'll sort of like move between all of them. Usually the architecture students are in the top one, and the landscape students are in the green building.
This slide shows you some images from our intro studio that we took in 2017, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we circled our faces. So that's when we first met. And yeah, intro studio is the studio you take if you're doing the 3-year degree at SALA. It's the studio you take if you don't have a background in design. And I don't actually have a background in design. I studied psychology. Lee, do you have a background in design?
My background is actually in film production. So I did a BFA in film production and had some work experience in film before coming here. So I didn't really have like a formal architecture background, although I was a little bit familiar with a little bit of it.
And I think that's actually my favorite thing about SALA, how The people that you meet here come from quite diverse backgrounds. And if you're taking the non-AP track, you'll find people from varying expertises, and you get to learn a lot from how they see design from their point of view. The next slide shows you some images of studio life. The middle one is my desk. After your intro studio, you take a vertical studio right after your first semester, or you jump right in as an AP student. And there you're mixed with students from at any moment in their trajectory. So you might see an upper year student, you might even see a landscape student if you're an architecture studio. And as an architecture student, you can also take landscape studios. As a landscape student, you can take an architecture studio. And so, yeah, the vertical studio is a place where you mix and you learn about different peoples and their own ways of doing design, and another place where you experience diversity.
In studio, we also make a lot of things. So we like to make models. We also make a lot of drawings. And Arnold himself tends to use models a lot to sort of express his designs and his sort of experimentation with design. You'll see that we often use really sort of typical materials like paper, cardboard, sort of whatever we can get our hands on to start sort of communicating design work. But we're also in Sala often encouraged to experiment with materials and start to use things that you wouldn't necessarily always see in typical architectural models. So in the bottom right corner, you can see Arnold's experimenting with plastic straws. And then in one of the images, you can see that someone's attaching some real mushrooms to a model. That said, we also do make a lot of drawings as well. Aside from just making things, we're also learning things all the time. These are a few photos that I found on my phone of some things that I was trying to remember throughout my years at Sala, such things as even sort of a wall assembly, the dimensions of a typical bathroom, accessible bathroom, or on the landscape side, a list of plants that I was trying to memorize for a quiz in a class in landscape architecture called Trees and Shrubs, which was really fun.
And at least for me, my favorite part about Sala is Good Times. Good Times is every Friday, time to wind down with your friends. Maybe your friends are in other studios, and it's a space that you go to, and you can drink and you eat food and chill out and reflect about the week and the work you did. And it's something that we definitely look forward to throughout the semester as a way to punctuate the semester with relief from all the hard work we do. And here's some photos of that space activated by the different events. Here you can also see waffle times happening by our health and wellness coordinators, Nick and Monica, always feeding us and keeping us energized with their waffles.
One of the things that is really cool about Sala that I really appreciate is that not only is there sort of an internal community within Sala between all the different degrees, but there's also a community that reaches out into both the local sphere of professionals that work here in Vancouver, as well as national and international connections. So through the sort of community, you can sort of find yourself in connection with a lot of different mentors around the world, but also there are opportunities within Sala in terms of co-ops and design builds and directed studies, which I think Blair mentioned earlier. I was lucky enough to be part of a co-op in which I was placed in a position at a landscape architecture firm here in Vancouver. And I worked there for 2 summers and did some research on sea level rise with Case, actually, which was really fun.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to do a directed study where I got some funding to travel to Korea. And on the top right, you can see the publication that resulted out of that. We studied cafes, and I drank a lot of Americanos that summer. And then on the bottom right, you see a work experience I had. At the end of just my first year, I was able to help a local firm making models, and one of which got sent to the Venice Biennale of that year. So yeah, some of the experiences that are possible through Sala.
Another thing that I I guess, is a major part of studio life is things like site visits and field trips, which are often optional, but also enrich the sort of learning experience. In the top right corner, you can see a series of photos from a site visit to a Northern BC community that was part of the Architecture Comprehensive Studios. So they were actually visiting the site that they were then going to work and design on for the rest of the term. And in the bottom right corner, you can see some photos that I took of a field trip that I went on last year that was focused on the architecture of boats, ferries, and the landscape sort of around that. So it's a really great way that Sala helps to sort of enrich the experience of being in studio.
So I just wanted to share some photos of actually my experience in Vancouver. I'm actually not from Vancouver, and but yeah, this is the house that I live in, and it's actually off campus. You don't actually have to live on campus if you go to Sala, and I live in it with a bunch of other Sala students, and we like to explore Vancouver together. We like to cook together and have casual pinups with each other where we crit each other's work. And yeah, some of these friends are friends that I met in my intro studio, and yeah, I love the community that we built here. So our final slide is about what are you working on now? I'm in my thesis semester, my final semester, and so I'm working on my thesis, and I'm modeling my bedroom. And so I'm continuing this interest in models, and I'm just making a lot of tiny things.
I'm also working on my thesis, but I'm not as far along as Arnold. I'm actually in the first of 2 semesters in which you start working on your final project. So that's my big stack of books that I'm slowly working through. And I'm also taking a vertical studio at the same time. So this little slug that I modeled out of clay is an example of one of the little pieces of a project that I was working on this term, and also maybe representative of how I'm moving forward with my other work. I think that's all we have for you guys today.
That's great. Thank you both for taking the time to put that together and to share a bit about what you're both up to. I think really helpful. Yeah, great presentation, Case. Thanks for doing that as well. I have been frantically trying to type answers for some of the questions, and I've noticed that Adam and Janice and Tara have been doing the same. There are a series of questions that are here on the list, and short of a better idea, I think we could, Case, and actually Lee and Arnold, there may be some moments where you could jump in, and absolutely Tara, Janice, and Adam and Emma could jump in as well to help us kind of field some of these.
We might just start from the top there.
Yeah, we could start with the top here. So in terms of our portfolios, coming from a design undergraduate program, should we focus on our work that demonstrates building design, or should we be including artwork, film, writing samples, etc., to show a variety of work? She's specifically interested in architecture, but I think that's a question that pertains to any program you'd be applying to. The snotty answer is yes. All of the above is great to include in your portfolio. I think if you're talking about kind of built work from a professional point of view, I think it's okay to talk about experiences that you've had in a professional setting, but at least on the architecture side, and I can imagine this is true in both camps, really being able to see work that you yourself have done, whether that's independent from others or as a collaborator, what portions of a project you've worked on is key. I think our faculty is really interested both for AP applications and non-AP applications, and just seeing your point of view, your voice, how you work through projects, whatever medium you may use, how you approach a problem. So maybe less of a here's a drawing I did and more of here's a drawing I did and this is how I thought about that drawing and what my intent was in making that drawing. Because as designers, we're doing far more applied work and work in response to a problem as opposed to purely expressive work. Case, do you want to?
Yeah, and I would add to that, you know, I think that there's also portfolio kind of restrictions in terms of how much you can include, but I would definitely say it's not so much about the quantity that you put in, but really about, you know, the intentionality with why you've included certain drawings. So it often helps to show different types of work that you've done or different modes of representation or different media you've used. So totally, um, you know, I think, you know, your expression, and I think how you talk about yourself, I think, you know, you want to make links between your kind of letter of intent, and as well as for your portfolio. So sometimes it helps to reference even some of the projects you were working on. So when we're reading your statement, we can kind of get a sense of who you are and how that relates to how you present yourself in the portfolio.
I think there was a person who asked a kind of thoughtful question about how UBC differentiates itself from other programs, which is answered in the typed section, but also what they might present as an attorney, for example, where you're not necessarily as heavily invested in your prior life in a design related or a making field. I think there are a lot of ways you could approach that. You know, I would assume that there is some interest in making and doing that could be shown. Some people are writers. We're very interested in kind of samples of writing or how you might actually go about organizing a paper or something that's maybe less visually organized, but still has to deal with structure and concept and organization, things like that. There might be something about the way you organized an argument or how you worked with a community that's specifically compelling that you want to present in some way. And you might think about actually how you begin to present that as the visual product, if that makes some sense. So how would you tell a story about what you were working on, and do you draw it? Do you use images and text? How are you putting that together? I think Lee probably had similar experiences. If she's presenting film work, she's not necessarily hand drawing a film. She might be organizing information in a way that's
Yeah.
kind
No,
of
and I
leading
would
to the
also add to
storytelling.
it that, you know, I think we celebrate diversity and what we like, and I think, you know, Arnold and Lee might be able to speak about this more. But what we like to do is like admit a wide variety of applicants, so that we don't get only students with one particular background. I think what is so great about being in the school, and I think for me as a teacher to learn from the students with all the different ways of seeing different backgrounds, and I think bringing that knowledge together, I think that's what we're looking for. So I wouldn't say that there's any disadvantage of not having any design background in terms of applying for the program. Maybe Lee and Arnold can chip in here if you want to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the themes that have been said are like intentionality and point of view. And I would say, yeah, lean heavily on who you are. Having reviewed the BDS applications the year prior, I think what I was looking for was not necessarily actually skill, but actually a point of view. Like definitely you need some skill to kind of articulate or communicate your idea, but I'm constantly trying to figure out who is this person, and leaning on who you are and what your background is. And this is my advice, rather than trying to see how you fit in this community, trying to show how you are a designer, but like who you are that's when the application kind of pops for me. And yeah, that's what distinguishes some applicants from others.
Yeah, I would say that maybe my approach when I was putting together like a lot of my work, which was very film oriented, was always to try and ask myself why this is relevant, and not just to sort of put something on the page that exists simply because it exists, but to try and sort of relate it somehow back to the way that I think about the way the world is designed, or how it could relate to architecture in some way, whether it just be a color palette that I did for a film or something like that.
Thank you both. Again, it's probably more useful than what Case and I were saying. I think it's really great. Yeah, I can remember portfolios in the past where there was somebody who was a chemist, and they basically laid out a series of experiments that they've been working on, but the way that they presented it was really actually fascinating. It was spatial. They were kind of describing crystal organization through this experiment that they were conducting, but it was just kind of remarkably documented. And it was captivating, I think, to the review group, the group of faculty that were looking at their portfolio, because it was both rigorous, structured, clear, but then this kind of completely, this kind of area that none of us had any real expertise in. So in a way, it was a moment where that applicant was teaching us about their world, which was frankly as interesting as somebody trying to show us what they thought we were, which is, I think, where Arnold and Lee both took this. I think there's another non-design background applicant question, and I think this covered that a bit. The next question there, are there opportunities that SALA helps facilitate for employment experience for students while in the program and after graduation? We have a co-op program. It's not necessarily us finding you jobs, but it's a way for us to support you as you look for work during the course of your study. There are employment opportunities with faculty to do research. Those come up quite a bit. There are opportunities to be teaching assistants. I think people on this call do that. Lee talked about working with CASE on projects and working outside of the school. We also have this brand new BDES program that just took its first class in this semester, which means that all of you on this call as MArcs will have an increased opportunity to potentially be TAs and to help deliver course content and pedagogical content, because in 2 years, I think 2 more years, we'll have a full 4-year cohort of undergraduates that will need support and instruction. Case, do you have other?
All I would say is that I think, you know, Vancouver, it's like we have a metropolitan area. And we're very well connected in terms of the, you know, Pacific Rim and in our region here. But it's also, you know, quite provincial in a way that there's quite some connections with the firms in and around Vancouver and UBC. So you'll see them a lot at reviews. And so they're very much involved as adjuncts also in teaching. So yeah, we try to do as much as we can to expose students to the different work environments and opportunities there. And yeah, as Blair mentioned, like, you know, the program that Lee that was part of had 4 internships on a 3-year, like for a 3-year long term at 4 different firms. So there's faculty members that kind of help to create those opportunities as well.
I'll also add that our faculty is from all over the planet. We have people who hail from other places, and I think there was a sub portion of that question. There are people who graduated 2, 5, 10 years ago that ask me for support for finding jobs or ask me for recommendations, and we absolutely track our students after they've graduated and help them in that regard. My mentor practices in Beijing, and I've sent 3 SALA students so far to go intern with his firm and then come back. I'm from the States. There are a bunch of connections that all of us have that we're, I think, across the board happy to leverage if we can get our students out there. That's our goal, is to get you out in the world being productive.
Yeah, and then as Blair mentioned, the mentor, we have a mentor program where we try to align for those students that are interested. A student will be coupled with a mentor from professional practice. Mostly professional practice. I think there are some mentors that are not practicing in a firm. They might be working for the city or elsewhere, but those are other opportunities that wouldn't necessarily guarantee employment, but those are ways to make those connections that might help you along in the future.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in as the voice from the great beyond here. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. I'm the communications manager, and I'm just keeping an eye on things from behind the scenes here. But we also have quite a robust professional development series that we do in the school. So it's kind of meet the firm nights, it's networking workshops. We're doing LinkedIn workshops as well on kind of how to get your job past school. So it's we have some very practical hands-on workshops that we do as well for our students that really help with that next step out of school and into working.
That's great. Thank you, Emma. You can see the questions as well, right, Case?
Yes, I think.
Do you think we answered that top one? I hope.
Yeah.
I hope that's a satisfactory. I'm going to go ahead and click the done button.
I think we also answered the next one, which is again.
MARC MLA dual degree and how competitive it is. Are you seeing that one?
Yeah. I mean, again, like, I mean, I don't think we have like numbers there. I think it depends a little bit on per year.
Yeah, but they are relatively competitive programs. Architecture and landscape architecture, we get far more applicants than we're able to take on. So yeah, I think all of the feedback you've heard about how to present your portfolio, how to write your statement about yourself, I think Arnold and Lee's framing of that and what they themselves did should be really good guidelines for how you might approach.
And I would say in terms of references, if you have the opportunity to get kind of a diversity of references, sometimes we see, let's say 3 references all from, let's say, the same institution. It's sometimes nicer to kind of get a variety of references that are able to speak to different qualities that you may have. But again, like that's not always possible, but if you have that option, that would be great.
I think academic references, I would say if you do 3, have 2 of them be from the academy if you can. That would be just a point of view. Although if you have really robust work experience and been out for a while, then that's a reasonable thing to do as well. But I think the closer they are, in case you can correct me, the closer they are to the discipline, the better. We've had a couple of recommendations where they're from a family friend or something like that, and that just doesn't carry the same kind of weight as somebody who's been working with you in an academic or professional capacity.
Hey, Blair.
Yes.
We do ask that 2 references be academic.
Yeah, okay.
It's a requirement. And
it's a requirement.
1 can be professional.
That's great.
At least in MARCH.
Great,
So
thank you.
with the extension of the BDAS this year, do you expect that the number of MARC applications acceptances will increase in the upcoming years? I think those programs, I think each program has kind of like a baseline for what we're looking for in terms of the amount of applicants. That has to do with studio sizes and teaching ratios of instructor to students. So they're not so much coupled with the BDAS program that has its own trajectory in terms of how that is the intended growth of that program in the coming years.
Yeah, I think the relationship I was trying to draw was that with increasing numbers of BDAS students, which I think at full capacity is roughly 120, that means there'll be many more courses taught in that area, which means there'll be more opportunities for you to be a TA and to work and to teach if that's something you're interested in doing as an MARC.
Next question, are classes going to be online or are they in person? Okay.
That's impossible really to know. Our ambition and our hope is to be in person with you as soon as possible and as much as possible. Our spring semester is online, but that's being driven largely by UBC writ large and applied science, which is the faculty that Sala resides within. Determinations they've made about safety, which is paramount at the school, and kind of ensuring that students and faculty are safe, basically. We are working to, in a kind of controlled and limited way, increase access to infrastructure for people who need it, researchers, potentially graduating students or students who are about to graduate who are doing their thesis project. That's something that's in the works. We're cautiously optimistic about the summer, and our fervent hope is that the fall will be in person. But again, it's a global pandemic. We have no control really over the problem set, just ambition, and we're working towards safe access for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, and UBC has been very proactive in this. That you know, when this semester started, or basically when the summer semester started last year, they already announced that, okay, we're going to be online in the fall, and just as September started, they already announced that we're going to be online in the spring. So, you know, I think they'll probably continue to be like that. So probably early January or a little bit later, we'll know more about the summer, and as the summer kicks in, we'll probably know more about the fall.
There's a question later on too about how UBC in general responded to the problem. One thing I've been really impressed by, not with ourselves, but with the policy that UBC's put forward, is the kind of way we're handling it in a kind of an empathetic way and an inclusive way. So even if we did begin to move to a live posture, my suspicion or hunch is until everything is cleared up, we'd be offering both in-person and some form of online teaching, just to ensure that those members of our community who couldn't make it back, let's say they don't live in Vancouver and they'd have to relocate, those types of things are accommodated and supported. And I think in general, the position of the school and university have been to err on the side of supporting students in the best way that we can, kind of tweaking our ratios of faculty to students in a way that's more advantageous to the student, because we understand this is a challenging way to learn, and it's a new, novel way to engage each other. So, but again, we don't have any clarity though about like when this will all end. No.
Just a question, are there particular types of work that applicants are encouraged to include in their application portfolio? It's really hard to tell. I think we kind of talked a little bit about your background and being able to kind of express yourself. So I think, yeah, I mean, that type of work, whatever that type of work is for you that best represents yourself, I think would be the one that I would recommend including. And yeah, the next question is about do you like to see process sketches or more explanation of design processes?
I think they're great to include. I mean, I could imagine sketches that lead to an outcome being something that you want to emphasize because you want to tell us how you thought about a project. I could also imagine a kind of a single project you start with, then a kind of process prototype you made because you were thinking about that project that leads and connects to another project. So it's a little more of a meta arc than it is an internal to a project arc. I don't think none of the answers you're hearing, and this may be frustrating for you, are going to give you a formula for success. Everything is based on your circumstance, what your background is, and how you think you can best express and tell us about your mindset, your thought process, your working methodology, where you're interested in being. Are you a shop person? Are you a pencil person? Are you a camera person? Are you a words person? All have value. It's just how you decide to express that is part of what we're evaluating, which is part of why we're being a little bit, might be perceived as slippery about our answers. It's because that's exactly what we want to see coming out of you. So I hope anonymous attendee is not angry about that answer, but that's, I think, the best we can do on that one. Janus and Adam, maybe you can help with this as well, because Janus, you said that there is a requirement for 2 academic recommendations or references.
Yeah.
But
I don't think I've ever seen anyone not be able to come through with that. The academic reference doesn't necessarily have to be from your undergrad as well. It could be from if you did another diploma program or just any class, really, you can use that as an academic referee. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Blair, but the admissions committee likes to use those reference letters to understand that you're capable to undertake a graduate program.
Right.
So the academic references are very important in that way, but they don't necessarily have to be from your undergrad. So if your undergrad is a long time back in the past and you've done another diploma program or something, feel free to use those.
Great.
There's a question about portfolio workshops. We do offer those for students that are already enrolled in SALA. I don't think we have one for prospective applicants. Is that correct?
That might be a Tara and Emma type question.
Emma, do you know if we have a portfolio session for prospective students?
We do not know.
Okay. But we do have one for, for students that are in the program. And this is more, again, I think Emma mentioned it earlier, to help you make those connections to what you want to do beyond SALA, whether it's applying for academic positions or working in professional capacity.
I don't know if Tara, if you're online, I know I give a portfolio talk once a year. When does that happen? Is that something these folks attend, or is that?
I am here, so hello. It would normally be part of the open house.
Okay.
And so we chose not to do it at this particular event, but that may be something we want to consider doing. Certainly, we could host a 1 hour workshop where you talk about portfolio creation.
Okay.
That would be up to us. Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm provisionally volunteering to do that if you want me to do that.
You're on video now.
Yeah, that's being recorded.
Well, then that's great. Everybody out there who would be interested in that, that information would go on our social media and on our website as soon as a date was established. So maybe we'll have a talk about that this week.
Great. Awesome. This should be pretty quick. Janice, can you see that one? Would students with a civil engineering degree be able to transfer credits for some of their structural courses? I think, yeah.
Yeah, they can have the courses waived, but what will happen is they'll replace those credits with additional elective credits. So your credits to complete the program will always stay the same, but you can do a different elective instead. Right. We don't want you to sit through the same class again. So you can pick something interesting to do.
Yeah, provide some flexibility for you.
Yeah, and in the landscape program, it's the same. I work closely with Adam. If there's a student that believes there are certain courses they've already taken, they can, let Adam know. We'll probably request the syllabus and some outputs from that course, and we'll forward that to the instructor teaching that specific course, and they will kind of look if the content that you've provided is somewhat similar to the content that will be given and offered in that course. And if that works out, then you get those transfer credits.
Same process for architecture.
All right. Could you elaborate on information you're looking for in a letter of intent? Should it be more personal to show the applicant's research interests, or how their skills and intent will align with SALA? Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I think it's sort of a theme that's been running through this whole conversation. We're really interested in you, your point of view, your perspective, and how you think about the world and how you're interested in engaging the world.
Yeah, and I would add there, I think making that connection with SALA will be important. I know that some of you probably will be applying to other programs as well, but for us to read that, it's somewhat makes us special as well, to kind of know like why did you apply to SALA, and why do you think this might be a good place for you? Because sometimes if we see kind of letters that we know are probably being sent out to 5 different universities with no specific mention of why you would actually want to come here, I don't think that helps your case because we can read that. And so I think if you've shown that you've looked at specific outputs or courses or specific professors in the work that you're interested in, that's often important, alongside obviously expressing who you are and what you can contribute to our community as well.
With studio classes being such a key part of architectural development, how has the switch, oops, it just moved, there it goes. How has the switch to online classes affected studio culture? Is it still able to survive? Yeah, I mean, obviously a qualified answer. People aren't hanging around on the studio floor together and kind of moving off in groups to get coffee and kind of debating in person. However, one of the first things the school did back in May, when this whole kind of situation landed in everybody's lap, is we began to build an infrastructure around studio. So we invested in and supported students to help us build Miro boards, so kind of interactive boards that we use for teaching. Each studio has a Miro board. There's a Miro Good Time space. There's a way for students to move through all of these spaces and look in on and engage in other people's studios. We've also begun to organize clusters, so all the first years are grouped in a similar space and are able to work together in that way. We have maintained our review culture in the same way. We just do it online. One of the benefits, kind of interestingly, about this whole COVID situation is we're be able to bring in much more specific reviewers from all over the planet to come and sit on your reviews and to critique your work and to talk to you. Some of the course structure has also been shifted. I know that our media course and our first core course in architecture and landscape architecture both have been rethought so that those courses and the profs and everybody are in much closer dialogue with one another, because we know that there are limited opportunities for everybody to talk to one another, and we want there to be that kind of exchange. Arnold and Lee might be able to speak to this as well. The Good Times culture, I think, continues online as well to a degree, that there are virtual meetups that people do, as Arnold pointed out, kind of little bubble spaces and clusters of students that are engaging each other as well. Did I kill it?
I don't think I really have anything to add, but
Okay.
it looks like Emma actually uploaded the Miro board link, and so you can actually kind of see how the digital space is now being used. And yeah, you can also see our studios there, and you can the thesis students there, and you can see the work that's being uploaded and being done online now.
Yeah, I would say that there's, in sort of moving to online platform, there's been a lot of opportunities for students to try and work together on projects. So a lot of studios have sort of embraced the online working, but also creating projects where you can always have someone else that you're sort of talking to and working alongside, and sort of maintaining that sort of mini studio culture within you and maybe a couple other people, which is nice.
Great. I think in the interest of time, we may leave it there unless there's one more question anybody's on the panel is eager to answer. But I think what we're going to try to do is collect the remaining questions and have Tara and Emma jump in here and make sure I'm not promising something I shouldn't, but have those questions posted with some answers to them so that folks can get the information that they're asking for.
Yeah, and I would maybe add, like, I think there are some questions. I see Ryan and some others. There might be, feel free to reach out to myself and Blair if you have other questions. I mean, yeah.
I think if they have to do,
respond to those probably are not. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say absolutely, and if they have to do with the kind of process of applying and things like that, I think Janus and Adam, I don't know, Case, I know that Janus knows more than I do about that process.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think if there's questions more specifically about, what's the identity of our program, or like,
Right.
are we dealing with specific subject matters in the curriculum? We might, Blair and I might be able to answer those. If there's more process related things about, references and portfolios and study permits, yeah, those are all questions. Yeah, Adam and Janus will be able to answer those. And again, like, I think make use of those drop-in hours on Mondays from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
That's great. Well,
Okay.
thank you everybody who's on this call. We're really excited to have you be here and to answer your questions and to share a little bit about all of our programs and our experiences here at Sala. Thanks Janus, Tara, Adam, Arnold, Lee, Case, and Emma for doing this evening. And yeah, we look forward to being in touch, to having a workshop down the line and answering more questions. And hopefully to seeing you here.
Yeah. All
Take
right.
care.
Bye,
Be
everyone.
safe, everyone.